hanging out in the shop, Kyle Mohan Racing, and I'm always getting asked questions. I'm always also being asked to post information about the car, about the motors, about the builds, keep everybody up to date. A common question I get asked is, what rotor am I specifically running in our 1,000 horsepower 3-rotor RX8? What has been done to the rotor, and why am I choosing that specific rotor? Because there are a lot of options out there at this point. So we'll get right into it. I have sitting right here in front of me a Series 4 rotor, and I think to a lot of people's surprise, that is actually the rotor over time we have chosen to run in not only this Formula Drift RX8, but in some of our other race cars as well. What we like to look for is something, obviously, that's not extremely expensive. If we're racing, we're not trying to break our bank account or our customers' bank accounts. We want reliability, we want usability, we want performance. So in an odd way, we ended up going with a naturally aspirated Series 4 rotor. And right here in front of me, I've actually got a turbo and an NA Series 4. You can see that the turbo rotor has a deeper combustion pocket, lowering your overall compression ratio. Because this was not street application, because this was racing application, we wanted that slightly higher compression that the Series 4 naturally aspirated rotor did have to offer. Obviously, you could choose RX8 rotors, you could choose Series 5 NA rotors, but with testing and development, excessively high boost numbers, and everything we were looking to do, and myself not being excessively wealthy when it comes to this stuff, we had an abundance of Series 4 and Series 5 parts. So the Series 4 rotor became one of our go-to rotors. As we developed the cars, we developed our practices with these rotors. Being that the Series 4 rotor comes in at 9.4 to 1 compression, fairly high, fairly consistent, but it's also heavy, coming in at roughly 10 pounds. Usually these rotors come in slightly under that, but we're just going to round it off to 10 and roughly 4,553 grams. That's a heavy rotor to be spinning to 10,000 RPM. So as we went on with Mazda tricks, with KMR, with our e-production programs, and SCCA, with our Formula Drift programs, we came to the realization we had to cut some weight out of it. This was not a new practice. Realistically, other companies like Racing Beat had been doing this for years, so we similarly ended up cutting a lot of our weight out of the side faces of the rotors. We're able to get around 1/3 of a pound out of these rotors, making them weigh similarly speaking to some of the later model rotors. Another thing we ended up doing, aside from cutting that weight out, was we ended up, it's hard to see, but we ended up cutting the tips down on the rotors as well. I'll give you some quick specs. Generally, from the factory, you're dealing with a 5/1000th of an inch step from the gear or land oil control ring area to the tip of the rotor. So you always want to keep that consistent. A good starting point is to narrow the gear and land about 5/1000ths on each side. And then from there, bring the tip down another 5/1000ths. There's also inconsistencies between rotors, casting variations, machining variations. So at Mazda Tricks and KMR, As we take any of the rotors through our machine work, we're going to balance the rotating assembly after we've lightened, side cut, and matched the rotors. People often ask about notching the rotors, similar to what had been done on the RX8 rotors. Via Mazda Tricks testing on our engine dyno, we took a race 1989 SCCA motor that was a brand new build, and we dynoed it, got our horsepower number, and then took that whole exact motor apart, notched the rotors on the mill, similarly but more aggressively to what had been done on the RX8, but not on the exhaust side, on the intake side, to try to get that intake benefit that everybody talks about. And we literally saw no horsepower change within the motor on the dyno. So a lot of people ask why at Mazda Tricks we don't offer that service, why at KMR we don't offer that notching service. We have found that for horsepower and reliability, no matter what rotor you're really starting with, my preference being the cheap, easy to find Series 4 high compression naturally aspirated motor, the recipe to success is a proper width, a proper balance, and if you're going for high RPM, high boost, shaving some weight out of it without sacrificing the strength of the rotor is a good way to go. So I think it's just a unique setup. I also don't run 3mm apex seals. I maintain a 2mm apex seal in all of my high horsepower builds. And of course, we have built motors with Series 5 high compression rotors. We have built motors with RX8 high compression rotors. I encourage everybody to find their own recipes for their builds, their motors, and depending on really what you're trying to get out of a motor. With Formula Drift, it's reliability and sustainability. If I was trying to drag race this car, or if this was a time attack car, I probably would opt for those Series 5 naturally aspirated rotors and just get a little bit more compression in there. But with Formula Drift, we can simply add more boost. We can play with our turbo. We don't have to squeeze every ounce out of the rotor. I hope this helps. This has been kind of a Tuesday night impromptu tech talk about the Kyle Mohan Racing Formula Drift RX8 20B motor and what specific rotors we run and what we've done to them. Before we go, there she is. Beautiful 1,000 horsepower setup, 2 years on this block, and we're running the exact rotors that I've been talking about, that Series 4 naturally aspirated rotor in here. On ethanol, 30 pounds of boost, roughly 200 shot of nitrous, 2mm apex seals, water injection, precision turbo, Haltech tuned by Nelson, built by KMR, parts from Mazda Tricks. Please come back, join us again. Feel free to ask questions, and I'll do my best to answer them as we go on in this pandemic, and I've got time to do so. So follow Kyle Mohan, visit the website, kylemohanracing.com, and have a wonderful Tuesday evening.